Hi everyone, Tony Shafar's on the podcast today, who was a guy who's of real interest to me through reputation and share clients. What I found interesting was that he got to the top of his profession. He was a CFO and FD, doing very, very well. But he decided to take a different route and become a coach, and now helps other FDs and CFOs with their overall performance. So what I wanted to talk to Tony about was what keeps us doing things that don't keep us fulfilled, and how can we unlock better performance, whether we're a finance director, a CFO, or a leader in general. And what followed was a really in-depth discussion. We spoke about some of the coaching that he does. We spoke about why people tend to build blockers in their careers or suffer with confidence crises at exactly the wrong time. So without further ado, good luck to anybody who's currently in transition and listening to this. I hope this will give you some really thought-provoking content. And let's get listening and get to work.
You're listening to the Career Jump Podcast. Insights, interviews, and success stories to inspire and give you the edge when you make your next career jump. Hosted by your career concierge, Andrew MacAskill.
Hello, welcome back to the Executive Career Jump Podcast. I'm your host and career concierge, Andrew MacAskill. And really happy today to be joined by Tony Shafar. How are you doing, Tony?
Yeah, I'm very good. Thank you, Andrew. How are you?
Yeah, look, really, really good. Look, we operate in similar circles in terms of coaching leaders out there. But for people that haven't come across you previously, can you just tell us a little bit more about who you are and the type of work you get involved with, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is very much in finance. I was a finance director for many years, progressed up through the sort of traditional finance route, chartered accountant, and progressed up to sort of FD, CFO level. And I realized that actually throughout a lot of my career, the technical ability was one thing, and that was getting you to a certain level. But actually, the bigger thing once you got to a certain level was more around the mindset. And it was more around, when you were faced with things like challenges, did you embrace them or did you actually avoid them? And when obstacles came your way, what did you do with them? Did you give up easily or did you persist through them? And I realized that, certainly from my own personal journey, that was quite a big aspect of it. And I decided that from what I'd learned and from what I'd experienced, that, it really helped me. And it was something I was pretty passionate about. And I got to a point where I was sort of not so interested in continuing to climb that corporate ladder. And I realized that actually I'd benefited quite a bit from coaching. I'd seen how the change in mindset could really help someone move forward in their career and maybe untell some of the stories that they'd been telling themselves. And therefore I decided to pursue a career and start moving forward in terms of coaching and predominantly working, not exclusively, but predominantly working with finance leaders who, very similar to myself, have been in a lot of similar journeys, and my sense is they'll probably understand a lot of the challenges that they're facing, and they'll probably feel understood by someone who's to a certain extent walked in their shoes. So that's sort of how I've come to where I am in my current journey.
Yeah, no, very interesting. So how did you get the courage, I guess, to make that step? Because, you'd climbed the finance ladder quite quickly, had some very senior roles. You were a success, weren't you, in the eyes of society in terms of what you were doing? And yet somehow you found it within you to step away from that and do your own thing. So talk to me about your thought process at the time. Was that easy? Was that hard? Why did you do it? How did it feel? I'm fascinated by that.
Yeah, I think it's, I did feel that I did progress pretty well in my career and got to a certain level. But I guess, it's interesting you talk about like your success and society expects your success. But actually what I've sort of learned, even at the time, but I've learned more so that actually success, other people might perceive you as being successful, but actually everyone's got their own definition of success and what it really means to them. And while society can actually perceive you as successful, you don't necessarily feel that. And I was sort of progressing up the corporate ladder, but it was getting to a stage where I was sort of yeah, I was in a traditional sense probably being quite successful, but the fulfillment wasn't quite there. I wasn't sort of wanting, not sort of, I wasn't wanting that next progression. I wasn't wanting to get that next level up. And what the big thing that really sort of changed for me was, unfortunately, when my dad passed away, it made me reflect a bit more about what's really important to me, what's really important, in terms of my values and what do I really want out of life. And they'll come, in however many, 30 years, my career will be over. And I want to have, it was a bit of a wake up call for me in the sense that I want to have lived my career and done my career for what I wanted to do, as opposed to what others in society and friends, colleagues, or whatever expected of me. That sort of, that awakening, if you like, for me. And it didn't, I don't know if it, yeah, maybe there was an element of courage, but it was more just that sort of reality that actually you only get one shot at this.
Absolutely. And obviously, sorry to hear your father's passing, but it's amazing that that was one of the outcomes of that event. I guess with humans, it's really interesting, right? Because it's not unusual that there is some kind of major event in someone's life, whether that's they overcome an illness themselves or somebody close to them passes, or, something happens that serves as a bit of a circuit breaker and gets them to go and do what they really want to do and living in line with their values and who you are. My frustration is, why do we need these kind of major events to redirect us? Like, is there ways that we can interject earlier with ourselves or be more aware earlier ourselves in order to break out from what we're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think clearly it's a big question, that, but in answer to the first point, why do we need it? I think fear is a big factor. I think the fear of change, I think the fear of, if you've got a steady job, you've got a steady career, and you're in that, you know what you're doing, and you've got that certainty, you've got that level of certainty, not just in the paycheck, but that certainty in terms of what you're doing. You turn up every day for work, you know what's going to be required from you, you know you're capable of doing the job. And there's a comfort, whilst for certain people it can be quite frustrating, there's a comfort in that certainty. And taking that step back and actually being prepared to do something different where you're not going to have that certainty. That requires a lot of self-belief. That requires a lot of real belief in yourself that actually you can really make that change. You can really do whatever it requires probably quite a bit of clarity in terms of, quite often I work with people who want to do something different, but they're not necessarily sure what it is they want to do. But they've never given themselves that opportunity to really step back and think about it. It's very much, okay, this is what I've done, and this is what I should also do. And maybe if they speak to recruiters, well, maybe recruiters will suggest, okay, well, actually, it will be more of the same. This is what you do. And they're maybe thinking they want to go left, but maybe recruiters and other people close to them, well-intentioned, are saying, oh, no, you'd be good at this, you'd be good at that. Why would you give up this career? You've worked so hard to get to this certain level. And if gut feel, you're maybe saying you want to go in a different direction, but you've got all those people who are well-intentioned saying to you, well, actually, no, stick with what you. It's very difficult for a lot of people to really move in another direction. And I guess, it would require quite a lot of clarity. When are people going to seek that clarity? When are they going to? You so get caught up in the day-to-day life that we're leading, almost maybe just that element of just surviving, getting on with our work, doing our job, trying to balance that personal and professional life. And sometimes people won't really step back and actually think about, right, okay, what do I really want? They spend so much of their life firefighting, whether predominantly in a professional sense, but stepping back and thinking, actually, what's really important to me? What are my values all about? Do what I'm doing, do they align with my values, or would I be better served doing something else? There's that clarity. And then I guess when you get that clarity, or if you get that clarity, then it's having said before, it's about having that self-belief. Can I do something different? And what quite often happens is people will they might start to think about, right, I wouldn't mind doing this, or I wouldn't mind doing this, or I'm interested. They'll always put barriers in their way. Oh no, but I won't make money on that, or I can't do that because of that. And what that does, that stops them even thinking, And very often I'll work with people who just say, you're just brainstorming. You're not making any decisions in the back of this. You're just simply blue sky thinking, what is it you would love to do? What would be in alignment with your values? But as soon as you start putting barriers down, it's just, okay, well, no, I couldn't do that because of this circumstance. Couldn't do that. And there will be an element, a point in time where you have to be practical about it and trying to understand what it is could work from a practical to fit around what's really important in your life. But possibly if you just cut it off right at the source, you're not really exploring what it is you really want, and maybe the different avenues that you could go down. And maybe, an avenue that is of interest, maybe there is another way around it. And that's very often where good coaching conversation can benefit, whereby you just help someone really trying to uncover all the things that are really holding back and the beliefs that they've created, and maybe helping them ask themselves, are those beliefs really true?
And they know, right? Very often they actually know, don't they? It's just that fear piece getting in the way. Like, the question, what would you do if you weren't scared, is a great way to start a coaching conversation, I think.
Yeah.
Just to get some of that on the table, because I think quite often, the amount of times people book coaching with us and actually within 5 minutes, they've told you what they want to do. So they say they're coming for clarity, but what they're really coming is for you to help them give themselves permission to get there. That seems to have been my experience. Do you think you would ever take a corporate leadership role again in the future?
I don't know. I mean, and I suppose I don't really try and think too far ahead. Certainly not at the moment, but who knows? We're all on our, as a coach, I'm on my own personal journey as well. And, I've got my coaches and I'm forever, trying to discover myself on this journey. So, I think for me, moving out of the corporate space when I did was the right thing. And I'm certainly really enjoy what I'm doing and find it incredibly rewarding. But who knows what the future holds, but certainly not at the moment. It's not something that I can see myself doing in the short term. You just never know. But I suspect if I went back into the corporate world, I would be a very different corporate citizen to what I'd been previously. And, it'd be very different than myself. So, yeah, I mean, who knows what the future holds.
Yeah, no, I love the fact that you're not like super clear and structured on that, because I think that's healthy. I think that's not trying to control all the narrative around what happens from here. And it's that presenteeism of, am I enjoying what I'm doing now? Absolutely. And I'm learning as I go. And I think trying to get more present in our careers is absolutely the right mindset, isn't it? So I love the way that you answered that. You mentioned earlier on when we were talking that everybody's definition of success is different. And I thought that was an interesting comment. Can you kind of share a little bit more on that in terms of your experience of what success means to different people?
Yeah, well, I think it's, people will make judgments of others and say, oh, you're successful, you've achieved X, Y, and Z. But they might not feel successful. I think a lot of it comes down to that element of fulfillment. Because if you're traditionally successful in other people's eyes, but you're completely unfulfilled, that's almost failure. Because it's like, well, I'm achieving what others perceive would be really good to achieve, but I'm feeling very unfulfilled at the end of it. I'm not feeling this has got any purpose in what I'm doing, and I'm just going through the motions. And it's almost like it's probably very more on that element of that validation, and being successful in the eyes of others. But ultimately, if you're not feeling successful, if you're not feeling that you're doing something that you really enjoy and something that you find fulfilling, then other people might perceive you as being successful, and that might keep you slightly happy for short periods of time when you get that compliment or you get people saying how well you're doing. But deep down, in terms of the life that you're living and the thoughts that are regularly going through your mind, all that validation helps to fit, but only to a very short, and it's very shallow, because ultimately, if you're doing something which is not true to yourself, you're not really enjoying, then you're not feeling successful on a day-to-day basis. And you can't keep going out. I mean, it's not healthy to keep seeking that external validation anyway, but it's not practical. I mean, it's not realistic. You need to really find it from within. So ultimately, for me, it's about really finding what is true to yourself. And if you're in a job, you're earning a lot of money, you're progressing in your career and you're very good at it, but you're thoroughly miserable, I would question, other people might perceive you as being successful, but I would question if you had a real deep thinking about it, and if you were really honest with yourself, would you see your success? Would you see yourself as successful, in the sense? I mean, it's almost like, I know it's a bit of a cliche, but there probably is an element of truth, not an element. There's a lot of truth in that, enjoying the journey, because if you use the analogy like of a mountain, if you're only climbing happy when you climb it, when you get to the very top, you're going to spend so much of your time pretty miserable. And it's if you've got the aspiration to become CFO or CEO or whatever it is of a certain organization, it might take you 3 years to get there. But if you're not enjoying the journey, if you're not really engaged in the process of that journey and what that does, and getting satisfaction and fulfillment out of that, and you're only happy when you've achieved it, the chances are it might be a 3-year process, you'll be happy at the end of the 1000th day or whatever it is, when you've actually got that promotion to that next level. And then I suspect what will happen is, okay, you'll be happy for that one day, and then the next progression, the next progression opportunity will start coming to the front of your mind, and then you'll be thinking, right, okay, well, I've done this, deep breath, let's go again. And then what's it all about? Because it's almost like you're just constantly striving for an objective that, okay, when you achieve it, you're happy and you're satisfied, but then there's just another goal. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have goals, and I'm not saying you shouldn't have longer term visions, but I think it's as much about being present to what you're doing and getting satisfaction out of what you're doing throughout that journey. And maybe part of that goal would be to really enjoy, to find something that you get satisfaction out of, and ensure that you are doing whatever you can to ensure that you're enjoying the journey as much as possible. Yeah,
very sage advice, that. And if you go back to stoicism and enjoying the process, and we know this, we absolutely know this, but it's so often missed. I know I've worked with people who've built and sold businesses for millions and are miserable as hell the day that they get the check.
Yeah, and absolutely.
Because it was the journey that got them out of bed in the morning. That was the purpose. That's what they loved. And they feel like they've just traded their purpose for a check, which, as nice as it is, obviously, there's some basic needs that need to be taken care of. So as nice as that security is, it doesn't even come close to replacing the sense of loss they feel and the grieving process they go through. A lot of people who get promoted suffer a 90-day dip in their motivation almost directly after that promotion, because the view from the top's not what they hoped or thought it might be, right? So it's so important that enjoy the process. I think it's a lovely message. Hey, everybody. Sorry to interrupt the podcast, but I wanted to tell you very quickly about how Executive Career Jump can help end your career misery. So when you hit our website, there's 3 different ways that our digital resources can help you. For a start, if you're looking to jump in to a new role, we've got the premier online job search course that you're going to find anywhere. There's a number of different memberships to help you understand what you want and how to go and get it in this current environment. So we're here to help you if you want a new career. We've also got a section if you want to jump up in your career. And so this is all about our online leadership hub, which is a platform full of content, includes 2 meetups per quarter and a whole thriving community of leaders trying to become the best leaders they can be. Go and check that out too. And the third area in our website and the other digital course that might help you is our business launcher course. So we've created the business launcher program that we wish we had when we were setting up on their own. So if you've decided to jump off of the employment stream and start up on your own, make sure you head over and check that out too. You can find all of these resources, a bunch of free content, links to previous podcasts and more at execcareerjump.com. That's EXEC careerjump.com. Now, back to the pod. Let's switch lanes a little bit then. Let's talk finance, because that's, a lot of the leaders that you help are in that FD and CFO space. And obviously not exclusively, but also you're from that world yourself. And it's an area of great interest. I started in finance for 4 years. I'm married to a financial controller. We help a number of FDs and stuff as well, which is how you and I got in contact, wasn't it? In terms of some crossover with the client work that we were doing. Where do you see the finance profession right now, and how do you see it evolving into the future?
Yeah, I think in terms of finance, I think the more people in finance can be real, sit alongside the business and really just see how they can be real true partners to the business, the better. Because a lot of my experiences as an FD is in marketing communications. And there's always a danger. There's always a danger when you're in a business, in a service-based industry, and you're in essence support staff, and you're not one of the fee earners. It's harder. Sometimes a lot of finance people can almost feel that they are just support staff. They're not seen as really important key members of the team, key members of the business. And sometimes they can almost feel that they are being slightly in a position whereby if they need support or they need help from one of the income generators, they're almost apologetic about it. They're almost okay, well, sorry to bother you because I know you're really important because you're earning the money for the business. And that perception, if they have that perception, if finance have that perception, is how others will see it. And actually really getting into a position whereby you really are truly adding value, and not just seen as, right, computer says no, or cost controlling. This is all about cost controlling it. For me, good finance people are very much about growing that top line, helping the business to grow that top line, as opposed to just curb the costs and ensure costs are tightly controlled. And a lot of that comes down to being in a position, finance people being in a position whereby they're not mandated and I'm not necessarily saying bonus, but KPI'd on, right, you've got to achieve certain metrics, not being too hard on them, because otherwise, if you adopt that approach, then you do get that element of we need to keep costs down. We need to ensure. But I think it's always about, for me, asking yourself, if this was my own business, what would I do? And by thinking about from that perspective, it's not just about keeping costs down, it's about how can we grow the business. And that might be in the short term or it might be in the slightly longer term. Now, to a certain extent, depending on the business you're working for and the metrics that they've got to adhere to, it's, that longer term vision sometimes becomes more challenging in certain aspects. If they've got to report to shareholders and they've got monthly reporting or quarterly reporting, it becomes slightly more challenging. But there are ways that you can be creative, and there are ways that you can try and install that longer term vision on things. And one example for me would be around recruiting staff. Obviously, a lot of what you talk about. my sense is that my view is that you should always be looking for good people. There might be, if you're in a revenue generating role, you might not necessarily have, you might have an idea, right? Okay, we need a specific piece of resource to help fill this gap. But if you're always looking for good people and meeting good people, you might not necessarily have that certain person who can fit that certain role, but you know that they're really good. And good people are flexible, they're adaptable. And okay, whilst they might not be absolutely perfect for that certain role, having a belief that the business will grow, having a belief that ultimately maybe they could do that role to a certain extent, but there could be other things and they could generate business elsewhere because they're good, they're capable, they're adaptable. I think that's a far better approach, and one which I would encourage as a finance leader, than someone saying, right, okay, we only need this person and don't spend any time looking for anyone else other than to fill this specific job that you're looking for. Because I think that's a very defensive, short-term approach. Whereas I'm not saying you always meeting and looking for good people and you should be always hiring them. But meeting good people, when opportunities come up, you have your antennae out and you start to think, okay, well, maybe they could possibly help in this area, or they could possibly help. It's not an exact fit, but I know they're good and I know they'd be capable to be able to adapt to fit that role. And I would say having more of that approach within a business will ensure that the wider business would start to see, or would see finances as far more of a partnership within the business, because actually what they're doing, okay, they're mindful of the costs and they are that, maybe at times that sensible head bounce other people, bounce strategies and other ideas of doing things with maybe some other leaders of the management team or the wider business. Having a perspective that actually, I can help you grow the business. I can help you. I actually think you should be talking. I think you should potentially be looking or even having discussions with people that may or may not be an investment in the future. I think having that approach is a very healthy approach to take, because it does feel that the finance people are ultimately invested in growing the business just as much as the CEO or the other leadership are, which to me I think is fundamentally important. They all need to be, to a certain extent, aligned in their way of thinking, albeit they might be coming at it from a slightly different perspective.
Yeah, okay. A lot there to unpack, but in summary, I think where we're at is definitely more forward-facing rather than just doing reporting. Less subservient sounds like a really important piece that's in amongst that, and more commercially creative. And whilst, as you say, there'll always be that temperature check, a little bit more, less risk averse is what I'm hearing. Sounds like a natural evolution in terms of where we're going. The subservient piece is really interesting because my mind was whirling whilst you were talking. I think a large part of the subservience that comes from finance is that a lot of FDs were practice trained. And having worked in an accountancy practice for 4 years where you're going out auditing, if you start in audit, it's a great grounding for many reasons, but you are a bit of a pain on site for people whilst you're out there. You are, not always wanted. You are digging around and having to be very customer centric in order to get what you need to do your job effectively. And if you think about that grounding, if people then take that into their corporate careers and when they flip in-house, you could easily see how that they might have some subservient traits that exist. And I've also heard the finance ecosystem talking a lot about internal customers. And I think that's an error as well, because if you start treating your peers like customers, they'll start acting like them and they'll start opting in and out as a customer would, right? Like a consumer would. So lots going on in that space, which is, it'll be interesting to see how it evolves.
I think I definitely agree with that. And probably a lot of it does come from that training. But I think as a finance person, if you can move away from that subservience and thinking, right, okay, sorry to bother you type thing, if you can almost come at it from two slightly different, how can I add value How can I help you in your job? How can I help you add value in your job and make things easier and better for you? And the way to understand that is from that place of real curiosity, really trying to understand what it is and just be open. And it's not necessarily about, right, all finance related questions. Really try and get to know the people you're working with, really try to get to know the challenges that they're facing. And when you come from that place of real, genuine curiosity, who knows what they might start opening up with? Who knows where the conversation and the relationship might go? And I think by doing that, they'll feel listened to, and they'll start to understand and appreciate that actually maybe that there are other ways that you could help each other. There are other ways that they could help you. And again, by really adopting that position of curiosity and really listening, people like to be listened to. And certainly, in the corporate world, quite often people are not. So by really just helping them and being a true partner to them in that capacity, I'm sure that goes a long way and will definitely change that dynamic from subservience to one of real partnership, I feel.
I love that. That's a very nice vision in terms of where we need to go. And yeah, I feel like it's moving in the right direction. And that stuff is not stuff that can be automated or replaced by AI either. So actually, in terms of future-proofing your career in finance, it's absolutely the right things to be focusing on. Let's wrap with a bit of a quick fire round if we can. So I just wanted to fire some stuff at you and get some quick fire answers from you. Any particular books that you've read that have had an impact on your thinking or that you would recommend to the listeners at all?
There's a very good book in Mindset by Carol Dweck. That's a really good book. And there's also another one called The Happiness Trap by Russ Williams. I can't remember, but I mean they're two very good books that I've read. There's probably a number of other ones. But
the growth mindset with Carol Dweck's absolutely classic, isn't it? It's brilliant. No, you can't read that enough. That's one of those that's really worth revisiting, I think. So, yep, very, very good call. Do you have a quote that you like or that you refer to? I'm a big quote fan. I wonder if there's any particular quote that's resonated with you particularly.
I think there has one for many years: change your thoughts, you change your life. That's very much because ultimately we are, if what we think situations that things happen and they happen and that's fact, but it's not the actual event that is the thing. It's the perception that we give it. It's the thinking around it and it's the story that we're telling ourselves around it that happens. And one thing, some person could lose their job. For one person, that could be travesty, that could be an absolute disaster for many reasons, and they could live and it could paralyze them for months and years to come. Could be a big story in their life. Someone else, the same thing could happen and they see it as a real fantastic opportunity, a great opportunity to do something different. And it's just very much the story that you told in that same fact, very different story, very different thoughts, very different outcome.
No, it absolutely is. And being able to make that separation between the event and thoughts and feelings is very, very important because that internalizes it, doesn't it? Rather than feeling like a lack of control and that we're externalizing what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it's very simple, but not easy.
Oh, no. Well, it's work in progress for all of us. I think that one.
Absolutely.
It's a very good point. You mentioned job searching there. Just quickly on that then, any tips for any FDs or other leaders who are potentially looking to get hired at the moment? Any thoughts on that?
I mean, similar to what I said before about curiosity, I think when people are job searching and when people are interviewing, they're very much quite often are on the defensive. It's quite often, right, I want to make sure, will they like me? They see a job description, they think, okay, this is the perfect job for me, and they prepare. And I'm not saying clearly you want to prepare for a job interview, but it's almost like in many instances they'll probably over-prepare, make sure that they've got every base covered, every angle. And it's almost like thinking about, right, they're going into a boxing match and they want to make sure that actually they're not they're ducking and that to make sure they're not getting caught out by any questions they're asking. The reality is, for me, they don't really know whether they want the job. They don't really know whether they want the job based on the job description. They may feel that they want the job, but until they've actually met the person, until they actually understand the people they're going to be working with, the culture of the business, only then will they know definitively whether they want the job. And when prospective employers are reaching out and looking for, they are the ones who are ultimately looking for people. So they need to find someone. They want you to be good because they've got a resource, they've got a need for a resource, and they need someone to be good. And I think if you can just be curious and just be yourself, and be honest about the things that you want to. If something is not right, if something doesn't feel right, if something doesn't feel is nagging doubt in your mind, get curious about it, ask about it, because my sense is that if you don't, it'll frustrate you. You'll think, I should have. But even if you do, and if you don't, you might think, okay, well, I've not said anything. But my sense is the prospective employer, the interviewer, will probably sense that there's something up as well, that something's not quite rung true about that. And I think the more you can just be honest with yourself, the more you realize that actually maybe it's not the right job for you. Maybe you thought it was the right job. And I guess part of that is maybe driven by a scarcity mindset, just thinking, right, this is the one job. There's not going to be another job like this that's going to come along for 6 months. I've got to make sure that I get it. Whereas actually, if you can maybe have more of an abundance mindset, you're less attached to the outcome and you're more coming from that perspective of curiosity, just to really understand, okay, it looks good on paper. I want to really understand if this is right for me.
Absolutely. It's a two-way process. And you're spot on about the scarcity mindset, because that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So you're going into interviews with the scarcity mindset, which then makes job offers likely to be more scarce. And so that spiral continues. Brilliant, Tony. Some fascinating insights in there. Thanks for sharing so openly with the audience. For anyone who's listening that wants to maybe connect with you, find out more about what you do, what's the best way for them to potentially get in touch?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, and send me a message through that. I've got a website, www.shafarcoaching.com, or you can email me at tony@shafarcoaching.com. But yeah, any of those ways. But obviously feel free to connect and send me a message on LinkedIn if you're interested in having a conversation.
Yeah, well, no worries. We'll include the links below for anybody that wants to follow up with Tony. And just thanks again for freeing up your time. It was really good to hear your story and to share the conversation together.
No, thank you very much. And thanks very much. Enjoyed the conversation.
You've been listening to the Career Jump podcast with Andrew MacAskill. For more resources and information, just head over to the Career Jump website at www.execcareerjump.com to supercharge your job search and start making moves. Let's get to work.